Do you hear it? That silence. It's the sound of a dying world. General Kryvak declared to his assembled troops, his voice booming across the command platform of his flagship. His crimson armor, polished and menacing, reflected the gleam of distant stars. Below him, rows of alien warriors saluted, their chitinous armor clicking as they banged fists against their chests in unison. Kryvak continued with a sneer. Humans think their crude tactics will save them. Let them struggle. We will show them why resistance is futile. The Galactic Dominion's most elite army landed on Terran 6, a key human stronghold in the Outer Rim. Kryvak's fleet had shattered the orbital defenses within hours, leaving the surface vulnerable. Expecting a swift and decisive ground campaign, he unleashed his heavily armed soldiers, each bristling with advanced energy rifles, personal shields, and tracking drones. Yet, as his forces spread across the rocky terrain toward the human bastion, something unusual happened. Nothing, no resistance, no ambushes, only emptiness. Sergeant Kane Matthews crouched in a concealed nest atop a ridge overlooking the enemy's advance. His breath was slow, his pulse steady. His rifle, a heavily modified XM-34 sniper variant, was a tool of precision, capable of punching through advanced armor if aimed correctly. Beside him, Corporal Ryan Holt adjusted the controls of a camouflage drone, the tiny machine silently transmitting enemy movements back to their position. "You sure they didn't bring more drones?" Ryan muttered, his tone half joking but tinged with unease. "Because the ones I've tagged so far seem to think terrain scanning is optional." Kane allowed himself a faint grin, never taking his eyes off the scope. They're overconfident, the Dominion so used to bulldozing their enemies. They can't even imagine a fight outside their playbook. "Hope they don't wise up anytime soon," Ryan said, double-checking the drone feeds. Far below, a Dominion officer barked commands to a squad, directing them to sweep the cliffs. Kane adjusted his aim, calculating wind, speed, and distance with machine-like precision. When he exhaled, a single shot cracked the air. The officer collapsed, a hole punched clean through his helmet. Chaos erupted in the alien ranks. Troops scrambled for cover, while their drones frantically scanned the cliffs, trying to pinpoint the sniper. Kane had already melted into the shadows, his position empty by the time a cluster of plasma fire struck where he had been moments earlier. "Nice shot," Ryan whispered as Kane slid into a new hide, resetting his sightline. "Always aim to impress," Kane replied dryly, scanning the alien formations for his next target. General Kryvak watched the situation unfold on a holographic display aboard his mobile command post, his claws clenching the edges of the screen. "How does a single primitive shot destabilize a squad of elite warriors?" he growled, glaring at his officers. "Human resistance is more coordinated than initial reports suggested," stammered one of his aides, avoiding eye contact. "Do not insult my intelligence." Kryvak snapped. "This isn't resistance. This is desperation. Their defiance will only prolong their suffering." On the surface, Kane proved the general wrong. Every calculated move spoke volumes about his skill and experience. His strikes weren't random, but targeted the heart of the Dominion's organization. His second shot downed the communications officer attempting to re-establish order. "They're scattering," Ryan observed as the enemy began retreating behind a rocky outcropping. "Good. Let them flinch," Kane said, his tone cold. "They'll hesitate next time." The human stronghold behind them had been evacuated 2 days earlier, leaving behind only a skeleton crew. Their mission was clear: hold the line long enough for the evacuating forces to regroup on neighboring colonies. Kane, however, took it as an opportunity to show what real guerrilla warfare looked like. The Dominion troops pushed forward again under Kryvak's orders, more disciplined now but still uncertain. They cleared rocky paths with indiscriminate plasma barges, causing shards of stone to rain down on the landscape. Yet, for all their bluster, they couldn't find Kane or his spotter. "They've got better toys than we do," Ryan remarked as he scanned the enemy gear through his binoculars. "We don't need their toys," Kane replied, marking another officer. His shot rang true, and another Dominion soldier dropped lifeless to the ground. The aliens froze momentarily, their paranoia growing. "We just need patience." Kryvak slammed a clawed fist onto his console, his frustration boiling over. "Deploy the hunter drones. Flush this ghost out and break him." The hunter drones zipped into the battlefield moments later, scanning heat signatures and atmospheric shifts with surgical precision. Kryvak's soldiers, emboldened by the new reinforcements, resumed their advance. Kane, however, had prepared for this. "Ryan, fire up the decoys," he ordered. Within seconds, crude electronic signatures lit up the landscape. Heat emitters stashed among the rocks created phantom signals, sending the hunter drones into a frenzy. The Dominion forces diverted their fire toward empty spaces, while Kane methodically relocated, picking off targets one by one. The aliens couldn't comprehend it. They had the advantage in numbers, technology, and firepower, yet they were being dismantled by a sniper they couldn't see. Kane slotted his rifle onto his back and signaled to Ryan, "We'll regroup at the fallback point. Let's make them chase shadows for a while." Ryan packed up their gear with practiced efficiency. "Think Kryvak's learning yet?" Kane glanced back at the smoldering alien position. "Learning? Not yet. He's too busy getting angry. That's what makes him predictable." Above the battlefield, Kryvak paced in rage. He barked new orders, demanding an overwhelming response to what he still refused to admit was anything more than human stubbornness. His underestimation, however, had just begun. "This planet reeks of death," snarled the Dominion sergeant as he crouched behind a boulder, scanning the desolate landscape. Around him, alien soldiers fidgeted, their claws gripping rifles that gleamed with advanced technology. No one spoke. Silence had become the default state of their march. Every shadow felt like it was watching. Every ridge seemed to hold an unseen threat. Far above, Kane Matthews lay flat against the cold ground, concealed by the natural camouflage of his surroundings. His rifle rested steady, his breathing measured. Through his scope, he could see the fear written into every movement of the Dominion troops. Their formations, once tight and disciplined, now staggered and erratic, had begun to fray under the pressure of his attacks. Kane's spotter, Corporal Ryan Holt, spoke quietly, his voice barely audible through the comms. "That's the third time that squad shifted positions in 10 minutes. They're scared out of their shells. Fear makes them sloppy," Kane replied, shifting his aim to a soldier who had wandered a step too far from the group. He squeezed the trigger, the rifle's suppressed report blending into the faint breeze. The soldier fell without a sound, his body crumpling in the dirt. The rest of the squad froze. Weapons swung in every direction, as if the enemy might materialize from the air. "Another down," Ryan noted, adjusting the drone hovering discreetly overhead. "They've got no clue which way is safe. Their comm chatter's a mess." "I'm counting on that," Kane said, repositioning to another outcropping further down the ridge. Their effectiveness didn't rely on sheer numbers or technological superiority. It relied on creating chaos. Kane and Ryan understood that the mind of a soldier could be as much a battlefield as the terrain. Below, General Kryvak stood amidst the growing disorder, his patience dwindling as every attempt to regroup his forces unraveled. He loomed over a holographic map projected in the center of his mobile command center, growling orders to officers whose responses became increasingly panicked. "It is one sniper," Kryvak roared, slamming his clawed hand on the edge of the table. "You are armed with the finest technology in the galaxy. Root him out and end this embarrassment." An officer hesitated before speaking, his voice quivering. "Sir, the terrain makes it difficult to—" "No more excuses," Kryvak interrupted, his sharp teeth bared. "Every second wasted is a disgrace. Deploy another drone squad. Burn him out if you must." The Dominion launched their hunter drones in force. A dozen mechanical sentinels zipped across the battlefield, their sensors sweeping for heat signatures and electromagnetic signals. Kane spotted their glints in the sky long before they reached his position. "They've sent the cavalry," Ryan muttered, eyeing his tablet as new signals pinged across the drone network. "They'll scan everything," Kane said, packing up quickly. "Let's move before they get lucky." Ryan triggered a set of decoys buried in the rocks. Simulated heat signatures flared to life, drawing the Dominion drones toward false targets. Below, the soldiers reacted as if each phantom signal was a death sentence. Plasma fire erupted into empty space as they shot at illusions, their weapons humming and hissing with futile aggression. Kane and Ryan slipped away to a prepared fallback point, their movements precise and deliberate. There, Kane found another nest, perfectly angled to oversee the chaos unfolding below. The Dominion soldiers began bickering among themselves. Kane watched as one commander barked orders at a subordinate, who shoved back in frustration. When one of their drones was lured into a trap and destroyed, panic finally overtook the squad. The soldiers abandoned their positions, running back toward their nearest outpost, leaving their dead and equipment behind. "Textbook breakdown," Ryan said, shaking his head. "Fear's doing the work for us," Kane said grimly, sighting down his scope once more. Another officer came into view, frantically shouting into his communicator. Kane exhaled slowly and fired. The officer collapsed mid-sentence. From the command center, Kryvak watched through drone feeds as his forces disintegrated. His claws dug into the edge of the table, leaving deep gouges in the metal. The holographic display updated with red markers, each one signifying a loss. "They are nothing more than savages," Kryvak bellowed, pacing in rage. "How does an army of cowards crumble under such trivial resistance?" A brave officer dared to speak. "It isn't just resistance, sir. This human, he's isolating and targeting our leadership. He's demoralizing the rank and file. Then crush them before the rot spreads further," Kryvak hissed, shoving the officer aside. "Bring me results, or I will find someone who can." Out on the field, Kane waited, letting the enemy stew in their confusion. Time was on his side. Every delay sapped the Dominion of their morale, their belief in their superiority. Ryan checked the skies, confirming the absence of aerial threats for now. "Think Kryvak's reaching his breaking point yet?" "He'll reach it when it's too late," Kane replied, his voice cool and steady. "If they think today's bad, tomorrow will show them what desperate really looks like." Kryvak, deep in the center of his command post, believed he was still in control. But Kane knew better. Control was a fragile thing, and with each precise shot, it slipped further away. The night was eerily still as General Kryvak stood rigid in his mobile command post. Outside, his forces remained entrenched, their nerves frayed after hours of relentless attacks. Plasma turrets glowed faintly in the dark, scanning for threats that never revealed themselves. Kryvak's blood boiled as he watched his empire's elite, paralyzed by the invisible human sniper, lose all semblance of discipline. "Enough!" Kryvak snarled, slamming his claws against the hollow table, the display flickering for a moment. His officers flinched but said nothing, their fear of him second only to their terror of the unseen hunter stalking them. "This human will not leave this battlefield alive." Kryvak activated his comms and barked new orders. "Pull all remaining forces into defensive positions around the command post. Establish overlapping fields of fire and release the seeker drones. Let's see him dodge our final assault." In the distance, Kane Matthews listened to the amplified orders through intercepted comms. A faint smile tugged at his lips. They're consolidating. He's drawing everyone in. Ryan Holt, hunched beside him, grinned. They're terrified. It's like cornering a wounded beast. They're just thrashing now. Which means it's time to put this to bed, Kane said, shifting his rifle slightly to target one of the command post perimeter guards. He adjusted for wind and distance, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. The shot rang out, sharp and decisive. The guard crumpled, and chaos erupted once more. Soldiers scattered, some abandoning their stations entirely. Kryvak's command post erupted into a flurry of panicked activity as more guards fell in quick succession, each shot precise and deadly. Every kill was deliberate, designed to send a message. Nowhere was safe. Targeting the guards, Ryan noted, watching through his scope as soldiers scrambled. Classic herding maneuver. Just wait, Kane replied. He shifted focus to the command post itself, where Kryvak's booming voice echoed through the air. The general's attempts to rally his troops only deepened the fractures in their morale. Find him, Kryvak roared, pacing furiously inside the reinforced structure. Or die trying. I will not have my forces brought to their knees by one pathetic. Kane's bullet shattered the soundproof window of the command post, cutting the general off mid-sentence. The shot didn't hit Kryvak, but it landed close enough to graze the display he stood near, sparks flying in a blinding cascade. Kryvak froze, his voice catching in his throat. That'll rattle him, Ryan said with a satisfied smirk. Inside the command post, Kryvak's fury boiled over into panic. The human wasn't just targeting his troops. He had infiltrated his very center of power. His officers avoided his gaze, their growing fear mirrored in their silence. Kryvak turned to them, his claws slamming down on the table. Bring the full battalion to me. Now! Surround this post with everything we have left. All that firepower isn't going to save him, Kane said. He adjusted his position, preparing for the final strike. They've lost. They just don't know it yet. The Dominion's battalion flooded the area, every weapon trained outward. Plasma drones hovered in neat formations, scanning every ridge, while soldiers crouched behind energy barriers. But for all their firepower, they couldn't see the enemy above them. Kane and Ryan waited in the shadows, watching the Dominion dig themselves further into their doomed position. Now! Kane said quietly. Ryan triggered the detonation of several explosive charges planted earlier in the day. The first explosion ripped through the ground to the east, sending dirt and rubble flying. Another followed seconds later, creating the illusion of an encircling attack. Dominion soldiers panicked, opening fire in all directions as they imagined enemies descending from every ridge and shadow. Kryvak watched in horror as his elite forces descended into chaos. He turned to bark another order, but found himself staring down the scope of Kane's rifle. Through the shattered window, the sniper had Kryvak dead in his sights. Don't do this, Kryvak growled, his voice a mixture of fear and defiance. You won't win. The Dominion always avenges its leaders. Kane's expression didn't waver. His voice was cold, almost dispassionate. Your Dominion doesn't scare me. You wanted war, and now you're drowning in it. A single, precise shot echoed across the battlefield. Kryvak collapsed, his lifeless body hitting the floor of the command post. The soldiers outside faltered, the loss of their leaders spreading like wildfire through their ranks. Panic turned to disarray, and disarray became retreat. Kane and Ryan watched as the Dominion scattered, abandoning their weapons and fleeing into the darkness. Ryan exhaled slowly, lowering his binoculars. And that's the end of that. Kane stood, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. War isn't just about strength. It's about making your enemy lose the will to fight. They came here thinking they'd crush us. Now they'll carry this fear for the rest of their lives. The two walked away from the battlefield as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon. Behind them, the Dominion forces had been broken, not by an army, but by two humans who refused to back down.